The prison ship Blackstone floated in the empty space between star systems, far from any trade routes or patrol zones. It was a massive vessel, 5 kilometers long, built by the Kethran Empire for one purpose: to break the spirits of those who opposed them. The ship had no official designation in Kethran military records. It did not exist on any map. For the thousands of beings who had passed through its halls over the past 30 years, it was simply known as the place where hope died. Drakve sat in his cell on the upper observation deck. The cell was small, barely large enough for him to stand and turn around. 3 walls were solid metal, but the 4th wall was transparent, a special material that allowed him to see down into the interrogation chambers below. The Kethrans had designed it this way on purpose. They wanted him to watch. They wanted him to see what they did to others, believing that eventually the sight of so much suffering would break him. He had been their prisoner for 17 years. 17 years of watching torture, murder, and cruelty. 17 years of maintaining his silence, refusing to give them what they wanted, the location of his homeworld and his people. Drakve was Dracon, one of the ancient dragon species that existed long before most current galactic civilizations. His people valued isolation and peace. They had hidden themselves away in a remote sector of space, avoiding the conflicts and politics of younger races. But Drakve had been curious. He had traveled beyond his homeworld's borders to explore the galaxy. That curiosity had led to his capture. The Kethrans feared the Dracon. Stories spoke of their power, their ability to shift between humanoid and dragon forms, their mastery of ancient energies. Having one as a prisoner was a great prize for Commander Jakar, the officer who ran the Blackstone. But it was also a frustration. 17 years of torture had yielded nothing. Drakve endured everything they threw at him through meditation and mental discipline, shutting down his emotions, becoming a stone that felt nothing. Today started like any other day on the Blackstone. Drakve sat in his cell, eyes half closed, breathing slowly. He had learned to distance himself from the screams that echoed through the ship. He had learned to watch the suffering below without truly seeing it. It was the only way to survive with his sanity intact. The door to the main interrogation chamber opened. Kethran guards entered, their gray-scaled skin gleaming under the harsh lights. They wore black armor with red markings that indicated their rank. Behind them walked Commander Jakar himself, a tall Kethran with scars across his face and cold, calculating eyes. Behind the commander, 2 more guards dragged in the prisoners. Drakve's eyes opened fully. The prisoners were human. He recognized them. Dan Brooks and Lisa Brooks, a married couple from the colony ship that had been captured 3 months ago. Dan was an engineer, a quiet man with gentle eyes who spoke little. Lisa was a doctor, strong-willed and protective of the other prisoners, but it was the 3rd person who made Drakve's heart skip a beat. Walking between the parents, small and terrified, was their daughter. Amy Brooks was 12 years old. She had brown hair tied back in a ponytail and wore the simple gray clothes all prisoners received. Her eyes were wide with fear, but she held her chin up, trying to be brave. The guards separated the family. They shoved Dan and Lisa into a smaller observation cell to the side of the chamber, forcing them against the transparent wall. Metal restraints locked around their wrists and ankles, holding them in place where they could see everything but do nothing. Amy stood alone in the center of the interrogation chamber. Commander Jakar circled around her slowly, like a predator examining prey. "Do you know why you are here, child?" Jakar asked in heavily accented human English. Amy's voice shook when she answered, "No, sir. Your species has been causing problems. Human ships have been spotted near Kethran territory. We need information about your military capabilities, your defensive positions, and most importantly, the location of your homeworld, Earth." "I don't know anything about that," Amy said. "I'm just a kid. We were going to start a new colony. I don't know about military stuff," Jakar smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Perhaps. But your parents know, and they have been stubborn about sharing information. I believe that watching you suffer will change their minds." In the side chamber, Lisa Brooks screamed, "No, please, she's just a child. She doesn't know anything. We don't know anything. We're civilians, please." Dan Brooks pulled against his restraints, his face twisted with panic and rage. "Take me instead. Do whatever you want to me." "Leave her alone," Jakar ignored them. He looked up at Drakve's cell, knowing the dragon was watching. Perhaps our ancient guest will find this educational as well. Let us begin. What happened next lasted 36 minutes. Drakve tried to look away, tried to retreat into his meditative state, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was the way Amy tried to be brave at first, answering their questions truthfully even though she knew nothing of value. Perhaps it was the sound of her parents' voices breaking as they begged and pleaded. Perhaps it was simply that he had reached a limit he did not know existed. The Kethrans were efficient and cruel. They had spent centuries perfecting methods of causing maximum pain. They started with simple physical pain, then moved to more sophisticated tortures. Amy screamed. She cried. She begged them to stop. She called for her parents. Through it all, Drakve watched. Each scream carved itself into his mind. Each plea echoed in his soul. He found himself remembering his own daughter, lost centuries ago to disease before modern medicine could save her. He remembered holding her small hand as she died, remembered the helpless rage of being unable to protect the one you love most. At minute 24, Amy stopped screaming. She hung limp in the restraints, barely conscious. The Kethrans continued anyway. They were not trying to get information anymore. They were making a point, demonstrating their absolute power over life and death. At minute 36, Amy Brooks died. Her small body went still. The life left her eyes. Lisa Brooks's screams turned into something inhuman, a sound of pure grief and rage. Dan Brooks stopped struggling. He simply stared at his daughter's body, his face empty of everything except horror. Commander Jakar checked the readings on his scanner, confirmed the death, and nodded to his guards. Remove the body. Return the parents to their cell. Perhaps a few days to think about this will make them more cooperative. The guards began to unstrap Amy's body. They handled it carelessly, without respect, as if it were nothing more than garbage to be disposed of. Something inside Drakve broke. It was not a loud break, not an explosion. It was quiet, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. For 17 years, he had built walls around his emotions, convinced himself that endurance was strength, that protecting his people's secret was worth any personal cost. He had watched thousands die, had witnessed horrors beyond counting, and had remained silent. But this was different. This child who reminded him so much of his own lost daughter, who had done nothing except be born human and be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her death was pointless, cruel, and completely preventable. And he had watched it happen. Drakve opened his eyes fully. They no longer held the dull, defeated look they had carried for 17 years. They burned with an amber light, fierce and ancient. Power began to stir inside him. Power he had kept locked away and hidden from his captors. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet but carried through the cell. Enough! The word was in his native language, but its meaning transcended translation. It was a declaration, a promise, and a threat all at once. The temperature in the cell began to rise. The transparent wall started to develop tiny cracks, hairline fractures that spread slowly across its surface. After 17 years of imprisonment, after 36 minutes of watching an innocent child die, Drakve had made a choice. He would no longer be a passive witness to evil. He would no longer convince himself that survival and patience were the highest virtues. Some things were worth fighting for, even if it meant his own death. Some evils could not be tolerated. The dragon was waking up, and the Kethrans would soon learn what it truly meant to face his wrath. The Kethran guards noticed the change immediately. The prisoner who had sat motionless for 17 years was now standing at the barrier of his cell. The air around him shimmered with heat waves. Small sparks of energy danced across his skin. The transparent wall, designed to withstand heavy weapons fire, continued to crack, the fractures spreading faster now. One guard hit the alarm. Red lights began flashing throughout the prison ship. An automated voice announced in Kethran, "Containment breach in progress. Security team to upper observation deck." Commander Jakar had just left the interrogation chamber when the alarm sounded. He turned and ran back toward the observation deck, a cold feeling of dread settling in his stomach. In 30 years of running the Blackstone, he had never heard that particular alarm. The upper cells were considered the most secure on the ship. When he arrived, he found a dozen guards already there, their weapons trained on Drakve's cell. The dragon stood perfectly still, but the cracks in the barrier had spread to cover the entire surface. It looked like a sheet of glass about to shatter. "Increase power to the containment field," Jakar ordered. "Maximum setting." The technician at the control panel frantically worked the controls. Already at maximum, Commander. The field is not responding correctly. Something is interfering with it. Shakar stepped closer to the cell, keeping his weapon ready. He addressed Drakve in the common galactic language. You should reconsider whatever you are planning, Dragon. Even if you break free, you cannot escape the ship. You will simply die tired. Drakve looked at him. The Kethran commander had seen many expressions in the eyes of prisoners over the years. Fear, hatred, despair, rage. But what he saw now was something different. It was certainty. It was purpose. It was the look of someone who had made peace with whatever came next. I have watched you torture and kill thousands over 17 years, Drakve said, his voice calm despite the power crackling around him. I endured because I believed protecting my people's location was worth any price. I convinced myself that patience and silence were virtues, that survival was paramount. The cracks in the barrier spread further. The material began to glow from the heat. But that child changed everything, Drakve continued. She was innocent. She knew nothing. She threatened no one. You killed her simply because you could, to make a point to demonstrate your power. And in that moment I understood a truth I had been avoiding. What truth? Shakar asked, taking a step back despite himself. That some evils cannot be tolerated through patience. That some lines, once crossed, demand action regardless of the cost. You Kethrans have ruled through fear and cruelty for 5 centuries. Today you learn what it means to truly be afraid. The barrier exploded outward. Fragments of the transparent material flew through the air. The guards opened fire immediately, their energy weapons lighting up the deck with bright flashes. The bolts struck Drakve directly, but they had no effect. His body absorbed the energy, using it to fuel the transformation that was beginning. Drakve's form started to change. He grew taller, his body expanding. Scales erupted across his skin, deep amber-colored and gleaming. His hands elongated into claws. His face pushed forward, becoming reptilian. Wings began to form on his back, still small but growing rapidly. The Dracon were shapeshifters capable of taking on their true dragon forms, but the transformation required enormous energy. Energy that Drakve had been secretly storing for nearly 2 decades. He had hidden this accumulated power through meditation and careful mental discipline, waiting for a moment when he might need it. That moment had arrived. The guards continued firing, but their weapons were useless now. Drakve moved forward, his partially transformed body still adapting. He did not kill indiscriminately. Instead, he moved with purpose, targeting specific guards. The ones who had been in the interrogation chamber. The ones who had hurt Amy Brooks. His claws raked through armor like paper. His strength, no longer suppressed, allowed him to throw Kethran soldiers across the deck with casual ease. Within 2 minutes, the entire security team was down, dead or unconscious. Commander Shakar tried to retreat, but Drakve was faster. The dragon grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. You will live, Drakve said quietly. Not because you deserve mercy, but because you will be a witness. You will tell your superiors what happened here. You will carry the message that this kind of cruelty has consequences. He threw Shakar into a side chamber and sealed the door, trapping him but leaving him alive. Drakve then turned and ran through the ship. Alarms blared constantly now. More guards were coming, drawn by the emergency signals. He fought through them, not stopping, heading for the detention blocks where the other prisoners were held. The first cell he reached held Amy's parents. Dan Brooks was still staring blankly at nothing, traumatized into silence. Lisa Brooks looked up as the cell door tore open, seeing a massive draconic figure filling the doorway. For a moment, fear crossed her face. Then she saw the intelligence in those amber eyes, the controlled fury. You are the dragon from the observation cell, she said, her voice hoarse from screaming. You saw what they did to Amy? Yes, Drakve said, his voice deeper now but still understandable. Your daughter's death will not be meaningless. I am going to free every prisoner on this ship. Then I am going to make sure the entire galaxy knows what the Kethrans do in these secret prisons. But I need your help. Lisa looked at her husband, then back at Drakve. What do you need? I need to reach the communication center. I do not know the ship's layout well enough to find it quickly. But you have been here for 3 months. You have seen the guards move through the corridors. You know more than I do. Lisa nodded slowly. She was a doctor, trained to function in crisis situations, trained to push emotion aside when lives were at stake. Her daughter was dead. Nothing could change that, but she could still help others. could still fight back. She helped Dan to his feet. Her husband moved mechanically, still in shock, but he followed her lead. "The communication center is 3 decks down," Lisa said, "central spine of the ship. But there will be heavy security there. And we need weapons." "Follow me," Drakve said. They moved through the ship, Drakve leading the way and tearing through any guards who tried to stop them. At each detention block they passed, he broke open the cells, freeing the prisoners inside. Humans, Vexathari with their blue skin and 4 arms, Prelians who looked like walking crystals, and dozens of other species emerged from captivity. At first, the freed prisoners were confused and frightened, but as they saw the Kithran guards falling before Drakve's fury, hope began to replace fear. They grabbed weapons from fallen guards. They began to fight back. A human named Chris Murphy took charge of organizing the freed prisoners. He was in his 30s, lean and scarred, with the bearing of someone who had military training. He had been a pilot on a human exploration vessel before the Kethrans captured his ship. "We need to secure key locations," Chris said, falling in beside Drakve as they moved. "Engineering, the armory, life support. If we just run wild, the Kethrans will seal us into sections and vent the atmosphere." Drakve nodded. "You are right. Organize teams. Take control of those areas. I will continue to the communication center." Chris began directing freed prisoners, sending groups to different parts of the ship. The uprising spread rapidly. The Kethrans had never expected their prisoners to organize resistance. They had relied on fear and isolation to keep everyone compliant. Now that someone had broken that pattern, the entire system collapsed. Dan Brooks, moving alongside his wife and Drakve, began to emerge from his shock. His engineer's mind started working again, processing the ship's systems and structure. "The communication center will be defended by blast doors," he said suddenly. "You cannot break through those easily, even with your strength." "Then how do we get in?" Lisa asked. Dan looked at the walls around them, seeing the conduits and access panels. "We go around. Through the maintenance shafts. I can guide us there." They reached a maintenance access point. Dan forced open the panel, revealing a narrow shaft that ran through the ship's infrastructure. It would be a tight fit, especially for Drakve in his partially transformed state. But it was a way forward. "I will go first," Drakve said. "If there are guards on the other side, I can handle them." They climbed into the shaft, crawling through the darkness. Behind them, throughout the Blackstone, the sound of fighting echoed through the corridors. The prisoners were winning, deck by deck, section by section. The Kethrans had not expected resistance, and they were paying for their arrogance. After 30 minutes of crawling, Dan stopped. "The communication center is just beyond this wall," he whispered. "Give me a moment to check the layout." He removed another panel and peered through. 6 guards inside. Heavy weapons. And a lot of communication equipment. "If we damage the wrong systems, we will not be able to send any messages." Drakve prepared himself. "I will take the guards. You and your wife protect the equipment." He tore through the wall in a sudden burst of violence. The guards inside barely had time to react before the dragon was among them, moving with speed and precision. Within seconds, all 6 were down. Chris Murphy arrived moments later, climbing through the maintenance shaft with 2 other freed prisoners. He looked at the communication equipment and smiled. Chris Murphy sat down at the main communication console and stared at the alien controls. The Kethran writing was different from anything he had seen before, symbols that looked like angular scratches. But he was a pilot, trained to adapt to different ship systems. He began pressing buttons, watching what each one did, slowly figuring out the interface. "How long will this take?" Drakve asked, positioning himself by the door to guard against any Kethran counterattack. "Give me 10 minutes, Chris said. "Maybe 15. These systems are encrypted, but the encryption is local. Once I break into the basic controls, I should be able to access the long-range communication array." Lisa Brooks stood beside her husband, who was examining the equipment with the focused intensity of someone trying to keep his mind occupied. Dan's hands moved across panels, tracing power conduits and data lines. "The main transmitter is here," Dan said, pointing to a large console in the center of the room. "It is capable of sending signals across several thousand light years. But we need to be careful. If the Kethrans realize what we are doing, they can shut down power to this entire section from engineering." One of the freed prisoners, a Vexathari named Krell with blue skin and 4 arms, spoke up. I worked in communications on my world before capture. I can help boost the signal strength, make sure the message reaches farther. Together, Chris and Krell worked on the systems. Minutes passed. Outside, the sounds of fighting continued. The freed prisoners had taken control of most of the ship, but pockets of Kethrin resistance remained. The prison guards were fighting desperately now, knowing that if they lost, they would face justice for years of cruelty. "Got it," Chris said suddenly. A screen in front of him lit up with what looked like a star map. "This is the communication network. I can see active Kethrin military channels, civilian broadcasts, everything. Where do we send the message?" "Everywhere," Drakve said firmly. "Every frequency, every channel. The Kethrins have kept these prison ships secret, hidden in dead zones between territories. It is time the universe knew what happens here." Chris nodded and began programming the transmission. "This will burn out the array after one broadcast. We will not get a second chance. What should we say?" Lisa Brooks stepped forward. Her face was streaked with tears, but her voice was steady. "I will record the message. The galaxy needs to hear from someone who lived through this, someone who lost everything to Kethrin cruelty." Chris set up the recording system. Lisa stood in front of the video pickup, taking a moment to compose herself. Then she began to speak. "My name is Lisa Brooks. I am a doctor from Earth, the human homeworld. 3 months ago, my family and I were part of a colony expedition. We were traveling to establish a new settlement when Kethrin warships ambushed us. They brought us here to this prison ship called the Blackstone." She paused, her hands clenching into fists. "Today the Kethrins tortured and murdered my daughter. Amy was 12 years old. She was an artist. She loved drawing pictures of places she had never seen, dreaming of worlds she would never visit. She knew nothing of military value. She was just a child. They killed her to make a point, to show their power over us." Lisa's voice grew stronger, harder, but they made a mistake. Their cruelty woke something that had been sleeping. Now the prisoners have taken this ship. We have freed ourselves, and we have found something in the Kethrin computers, something they never wanted anyone to see. Dan Brooks stepped into view, holding a data tablet. "These are the locations of 17 other prison ships like this one. These are the routes they travel, the schedules they keep, the systems they hide in. The Kethrins have been operating these vessels for decades, torturing and killing thousands of beings from dozens of species. They have done this in secret, in the darkness between stars where no one could see." Lisa continued. "We are transmitting all of this data with this message. We are broadcasting it across every channel we can reach, to humanity, to the Vexithari, to the Prelians, to every civilized species in the galaxy. The Kethrins are not what they claim to be. Behind their claims of law and order, they run secret prisons where they commit atrocities." She leaned closer to the camera. "To any human ships receiving this message, we are at these coordinates. The Kethrins will send forces to retake this ship. We will hold out as long as we can. But more importantly, use the data we are sending. Find the other prison ships. Free the prisoners. Make the Kethrins answer for what they have done." Her voice broke slightly. "My daughter died here. I cannot bring her back. But I can make sure her death means something. I can make sure other parents do not lose their children to Kethrin cruelty. That is my promise to Amy. That is my message to the galaxy." Chris ended the recording and immediately began the transmission. The communication array lit up, sending the message outward in all directions across hundreds of frequencies. Along with the video, it carried all the data Dan had found in the Kethrin computers: locations, schedules, prisoner lists, documentation of torture and execution. The broadcast lasted 5 minutes before the array burned out, overloaded by the massive power draw. But 5 minutes was enough. The message was out, traveling through space at faster than light speed, spreading across the galaxy. "It is done," Chris said quietly. "Now we wait and see who is listening." Drakve looked at the burned-out equipment and nodded. "You have done well. Now we must prepare. The Kethrins will not let this stand. They will send ships to destroy us before rescue can arrive." He was right. In another part of the Blackstone, Commander Jakar had managed to break out of the chamber where Drakve had trapped him. He reached a backup communication station and immediately sent a distress call to nearby Kethrin vessels. 3 heavy cruisers, the Vengeance, the Iron Fist, and the Dark Star, received the message and changed course. They were 8 hours away at maximum speed. Jakar also sent a second message to Kethrin High Command, warning them that secret data about the prison ship network had been broadcast. The response was swift and brutal. Destroy the Blackstone and everyone on it. Leave no evidence. Leave no witnesses. The clock was now ticking. The prisoners had 8 hours before overwhelming force arrived to kill them all. Meanwhile, far across space, the message reached human territories. Most human ships were too far away to respond in time. The message would take days to reach the main naval bases. But there was one exception. The exploration ship Nova's Light was on the edge of human space, conducting a survey mission in an uncharted system. Captain Alex Kane was in his quarters reviewing the day's scan data when his communication officer knocked on the door. "Captain, you need to hear this," the officer said, her face pale. "We just picked up a broadcast. It is from a Kethrin prison ship. There are humans aboard." Kane followed her to the bridge. The entire crew was gathered around the communication station, listening to Lisa Brooks's message. The room was silent except for her voice, describing what had happened to her daughter. When the message ended, Kane stood frozen for a moment. He was a career officer, 42 years old with 20 years of service. He had seen combat. He had lost friends. But the image of what had been done to a 12-year-old girl struck him hard. "How far away are the coordinates?" he asked quietly. 6 hours at maximum speed, sir," his navigation officer replied. "But Captain, we are an exploration vessel. We have light weapons, minimal armor. The message said Kethrin forces will be coming. If we go there, we will be flying into a fight we cannot win." Kane looked at the frozen image of Lisa Brooks on the screen, saw the grief and determination in her eyes. He thought about his own daughter, safe back on Earth, 9 years old and full of life. He thought about what would happen to those prisoners if no one came to help them. "Set course for those coordinates," he said. "Maximum speed." "Sir, the regulations require we report to command before engaging in any combat operations," his second officer said carefully. Kane turned to face his crew. "Those regulations assume we have time to wait for orders. The prisoners on that ship do not have time. Yes, we will send a message to command. Yes, we will request backup. But we are the only human ship close enough to help right now, so we are going." He walked to his command chair and sat down. "Send everything from that broadcast to Fleet Command. Include my personal log entry stating that I am proceeding to render assistance to human civilians in distress. If Command has a problem with that, they can reprimand me after we get those people out." The Nova's Light changed course, accelerating toward the Blackstone's location. In his quarters, Kane recorded a more detailed message for the Naval Command, explaining the situation and requesting immediate military support. He knew that other ships were too far away. By the time help arrived, the fight would be long over one way or another. But he also knew he could not live with himself if he did nothing. Sometimes the right choice was also the dangerous one. Back on the Blackstone, the freed prisoners worked frantically to prepare defenses. They had control of the ship, but it was badly damaged from the fighting. Many systems were offline. The weapons were only partially functional. Against 3 heavy cruisers, they stood out grimly. Now we tell the G. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Dan Brooks led teams of engineers through the Blackstone, working to bring damaged systems back online. The ship's main power core was functioning, but many conduits had been destroyed in the fighting. They rerouted power, bypassing damaged sections, prioritizing weapons and shields. Chris Murphy organized the freed prisoners into defensive positions throughout the ship. Most had no military training, but they were motivated by years of suffering and the knowledge that surrender meant death or recapture. He placed armed guards at key choke points, set up fields of fire, and prepared fallback positions. Lisa Brooks worked in the medical bay, treating the wounded from both sides. Even Kethrin guards who had surrendered received care. She was a doctor, and her oath to help those in need went beyond species or past crimes. Some of the other prisoners questioned this, but she was firm. "We are not like them," she said. "We do not torture. We do not murder the helpless. That is the difference between us and the Kethrins." Drakve moved through the ship in his full dragon form now, too large to fit in most corridors but able to maneuver in the main cargo bays and hangar areas. His presence gave the prisoners courage. He was living proof that their captors could be defeated. They also discovered more evidence of Kethrin crimes in the computer systems, video files showing interrogations and executions. Lists of prisoners who had died on the Blackstone over 30 years. Names, species, dates. The scale of it was staggering. Over 15,000 beings had passed through this ship. Less than a quarter had survived to be released or transferred. Chris copied everything to portable data storage units. Even if they did not survive, this evidence needed to reach the wider galaxy. 5 hours after the message was sent, the Nova's light dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Captain Kane immediately began scanning the area. His sensors picked up the Blackstone drifting without main power, clearly damaged. But he also detected something else. 3 large signatures approaching from a different vector. The Kethran cruisers. They will arrive in 90 minutes, his tactical officer reported. Sir, those are heavy warships. Each one outguns us by a factor of 10. Kane nodded grimly. Open a channel to the Blackstone. Let them know we are here. On the prison ship, Chris Murphy was the first to see the incoming signal. We have a ship approaching. Small signature. Transmitting human identification codes. Hope flared in the command center. Drakva moved closer to the communication console. Put them through. Captain Kane's face appeared on the screen. He was a stern-looking man with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes, but those eyes were sharp and determined. This is Captain Alex Kane of the exploration ship Nova's Light. I received your broadcast. I am here to render assistance. Captain, this is Chris Murphy. I was a lieutenant in the Human Exploration Corps before capture. I am coordinating the defense of this vessel. He paused. We appreciate your arrival, but you should know 3 Kethran heavy cruisers are inbound. They will be here in less than 2 hours. Kane's expression did not change. I am aware. My question is, can you fight? Drakve stepped into view of the camera. Kane's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the dragon, but he recovered quickly. I am Drakve of the Dracon, the dragon said. We have partial weapons capability on this ship. We have freed prisoners willing to fight, and I can engage enemy vessels directly in space. The question is not whether we can fight, but whether we can win. Kane studied them for a moment. Honestly? Against 3 heavy cruisers, our chances are not good. My ship is fast but lightly armed. Your ship is damaged. Even with you able to fight in space, we are badly outnumbered. Then why did you come? Lisa Brooks asked, stepping forward. Kane looked at her, recognizing her from the broadcast. His voice softened slightly. Because you are human civilians in distress. Because what was done to your daughter and the others on that ship is unacceptable. Because someone needed to respond, and I was the closest. He straightened in his command chair. So here is what we are going to do. We are not going to run. We are not going to surrender. We are going to make those Kethran ships regret coming here. Maybe we win, maybe we do not. But we will make them pay for every meter of space. What is your plan? Drakve asked. Kane smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We use you as bait. The Kethrans are coming expecting a helpless prison ship. They do not know about the Nova's Light hiding nearby. And they probably do not realize you can fight in space. We let them approach thinking they have an easy target. Then we spring the trap. Over the next hour, they refined the plan. The Blackstone would appear completely dead, drifting without power. Drakve would hide in the shadow of a nearby moon, using its mass to block sensor readings. The Nova's Light would power down to minimal levels and position itself behind a cluster of asteroids. When the Kethran cruisers arrived, they would approach the Blackstone to confirm its destruction. At close range, the trap would be sprung. The prison ship would power up and fire its main weapons. The Nova's Light would come screaming in from the asteroids, and Drakve would attack from the moon. It was a desperate plan with a dozen ways to fail. But it was a plan. The Kethrans arrived exactly on schedule. The 3 cruisers dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a standard tactical formation. The Vengeance in the lead, with the Iron Fist and Dark Star flanking it. They were massive vessels, each over 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons. The cruiser captains saw the Blackstone drifting lifeless ahead of them. Their sensors detected no power signatures, no active weapons. Just a dead ship floating in space. Standard approach pattern, the commander of the Vengeance ordered. Confirm all prisoners are dead, then destroy the ship. Leave no evidence. The 3 cruisers moved forward confidently. They had responded to dozens of prisoner uprisings over the years. None had ever succeeded. This would be just another routine cleanup operation. They closed to within 5 kilometers of the Blackstone. At that range, they could target specific sections of the ship, ensuring complete destruction. Now, Kane said quietly on the Nova's light. The Blackstone suddenly blazed with light. Power surged through its systems. Dan Brooks and his team had done their work well. The main weapons array, offline for hours, came back to life. A massive energy beam lanced out from the prison ship, striking the lead cruiser's engines. The Vengeance shuddered under the impact. Its shields held, but barely. Alarms blared on the bridge as the crew scrambled to respond to the unexpected attack. At the same moment, the Nova's light burst out from the asteroid field at full acceleration. Captain Kane had positioned his ship perfectly. The small, fast exploration vessel came in at an angle. The Kethran shields were not optimized to defend, targeting the connection points between the hull and the engine assemblies. "Fire," Kane ordered. The Nova's light was not heavily armed, but its weapons were precise. Targeting lasers found weak points in the Kethran armor. Small explosions rippled across the Iron Fist's starboard side. Then Drakve entered the fight. The dragon launched himself from the moon's shadow, his massive form accelerating through space. He did not need a ship. His species had evolved with natural abilities to survive in vacuum and propel themselves using a form of energy manipulation humans did not fully understand. He crashed into the dark star like a living missile. His claws tore through the cruiser's outer hull. He focused energy blasts at critical systems, targeting sensors, weapons arrays, and shield generators. The Kethrans inside scrambled to respond, firing internal weapons at him, but the dragon's scales were incredibly resilient. The battle became chaos. The Kethrans had expected a simple extermination mission. Instead, they found themselves fighting on 3 fronts against enemies who knew their weaknesses. The Vengeance turned to engage the Blackstone. But the prison ship, while damaged, was still massive and heavily armored. It could absorb punishment. Dan Brooks carefully managed the power distribution, keeping shields strong on the sections taking fire, while channeling energy to weapons on other sides. The Iron Fist tried to pursue the Nova's light, but Kane's ship was too fast and maneuverable. It darted between the larger vessels, firing quick bursts before accelerating away. Kane was not trying to destroy the cruisers. He was trying to disable them, to take away their ability to fight. Drakve continued his assault on the Dark Star. He had breached the outer hull and was now inside the ship itself, moving through corridors in a partially compressed form. Kethran crew members fled before him. He ignored most of them, focusing on reaching the cruiser's power core. On the Blackstone, Lisa Brooks watched the battle through the external cameras. She saw the Nova's light weaving through Kethran fire, saw Drakve tearing through the Dark Star's hull, saw the larger cruisers starting to lose coordination as their systems failed. "We might actually win this," Chris Murphy said, watching the tactical display. Then everything changed. The Vengeance's commander, realizing they were losing, made a desperate decision. If they could not recapture the Blackstone, they would destroy it. He ordered a full missile barrage, every weapon on the ship firing at once. Hundreds of missiles streaked toward the prison ship. Dan Brooks saw them coming and knew immediately they could not stop them all. The shields would fail. The ship would be destroyed. "Brace for impact," he said over. The Vengeance, now alone, found itself facing a choice. Its commander looked at the damaged prison ship, the small but deadly human exploration vessel, and the dragon floating in space between them. He had lost 2 escorts, his weapons were damaged, and his crew was demoralized. Pride told him to continue the fight. Survival instinct told him to run. Survival won. The Vengeance turned and jumped away, following the other cruisers into faster-than-light travel. For a moment, there was silence. The battle was over. They had won. Then cheering erupted throughout the Blackstone. Freed prisoners celebrated, embracing each other, crying with relief and joy. They had faced overwhelming odds and survived. Captain Kane ordered his crew to stand down from combat alert. The Nova's light approached the Blackstone slowly, checking for any remaining threats. "Someone get me a visual on the dragon," Kane said. "I need to know if he is alive." The external cameras found Drakve floating in space near where he had intercepted the missile barrage. His massive form was scorched and wounded. Several scales cracked or missing. Energy leaked from cuts in his hide. But he was moving, slowly pulling himself back toward the prison ship. A docking port on the Blackstone opened. Drakve maneuvered himself inside and the port sealed behind him. He collapsed in the hangar bay, his body beginning to shift back toward his smaller humanoid form. The transformation was slower than usual, his injuries making the process difficult. Lisa Brooks ran into the hangar with a medical team. They had no idea how to treat dragon physiology, but she improvised using what she knew about treating energy burns and physical trauma. Drakve's body was already beginning to heal itself, but slowly. "You saved us," Lisa said, working on sealing one of the larger wounds. "If you had not stopped those missiles, we would all be dead." Drakve's eyes opened, amber and weary. "The child," he said quietly. "Amy, I could not save her." "But I could save you. I could save all of you." That had to be enough. Lisa's hands paused for a moment. Then she continued working. "It is enough. You gave her death meaning. You made sure it was not just another forgotten tragedy." Over the next hour, they secured the ship and began damage assessment. The Blackstone was badly hurt but functional. The Nova's light had taken some hits but nothing critical. Most importantly, there were no fatalities among the freed prisoners. Some injuries, some close calls, but everyone had survived the battle. Captain Kane came aboard the Blackstone to meet with the prisoner leaders. He stood in the command center that had once belonged to Commander Jakar, and looked around at the faces of people who had endured horrors he could barely imagine. "I have good news," he said. "I just received confirmation that a human naval task force is en route. 5 destroyers and a carrier group. They will arrive within 12 hours. They received your broadcast and the data you transmitted. The evidence of Kethran war crimes is now in the hands of multiple governments and the Galactic Council." "What will happen now?" Chris Murphy asked. Kane pulled up a star map on the command console. "Using the intelligence you recovered, human forces and allied species are moving to intercept the other prison ships. The Kethrans kept them on predictable routes. We know where they are. We know when they will be vulnerable. Over the next weeks, we are going to shut down the entire network." Dan Brooks looked at the map, seeing the locations marked. 17 prison ships scattered across a vast region of space. That is a lot of ships to find and capture. "That is why we are not doing it alone," Kane said. "The Vexthari are sending their fleet. The Prelians are mobilizing. 24 other species who had citizens in those prisons are contributing forces. This became bigger than just a human operation the moment you broadcast that data." Drakve, still recovering in the hangar bay but listening through the communication system, spoke up. "And the Kethrans? What consequences will they face?" Kane's expression hardened. "The Galactic Council is calling an emergency session. Economic sanctions at minimum. Possibly military intervention if they do not cooperate. But the real damage is to their reputation. For 500 years, they claimed to be upholders of law and order. Now everyone knows what they really are." Over the following weeks, the campaign Kane described unfolded exactly as planned. Human ships, supported by dozens of other species, located and seized the Kethran prison ships one by one. Some surrendered without a fight when they realized they were surrounded. Others tried to resist and were destroyed. A few managed to escape, but their positions were now known. They could run but not hide. The prisoners freed from these ships told similar stories of torture, cruelty, and systematic abuse. The evidence mounted. The Galactic Council imposed strict sanctions on the Kethran Empire. Several high-ranking officials, including the minister who oversaw the prison system, were arrested and put on trial. Commander Jakar, captured aboard the Blackstone, became a key witness. Facing execution for his crimes, he chose to cooperate with investigators, providing detailed information about the prison network's operations. His testimony helped identify other commanders and officials involved in the program. Lisa Brooks became a prominent advocate for war crimes prosecution. She testified before the Galactic Council, describing what had happened to Amy and demanding justice not just for humans but for all species who had suffered. Her testimony was powerful and moved many to action. Dan Brooks returned to engineering work but with a new focus. He designed security systems and defensive technologies to help colony ships avoid ambush. His work saved countless lives in the years that followed. Chris Murphy rejoined the human military with a promotion to captain. He led several operations to rescue prisoners from the remaining Kethran facilities. Drakve eventually returned to his homeworld, finally free after 18 years of imprisonment. But he did not simply disappear. He maintained contact with humanity and participated in several more rescue operations, using his unique abilities to help those who could not help themselves. A year after the events on the Blackstone, a memorial was dedicated on New Hope, a human colony world. It was a simple structure, a white stone wall with names carved into it. At the top was Amy Brooks, age 12. Below her name were hundreds of others, all humans who had died in Kethrin captivity. Lisa and Dan Brooks attended the dedication ceremony. They stood before the wall looking at their daughter's name. The pain had not gone away. It never would. But they had found a way to live with it, to channel it into something productive. Captain Kane stood with them. Along with Chris Murphy, several crew members from the Nova's Light, and dozens of freed prisoners who had come to pay their respects. Drakve was there too, in his humanoid form, standing slightly apart from the crowd. He had not wanted to draw attention from the ceremony, but Lisa had insisted he attend. When the formal speeches ended, Lisa walked over to him. "Thank you for coming." "I would not have missed it," Drakve said quietly. "She changed everything." That child, who never had a chance to live her life, became the catalyst that freed thousands and changed how the galaxy views justice. Dan Brooks joined them. He looked healthier now, though still carrying visible grief. "They are calling it Amy's War, the entire campaign to shut down the prison ships. I do not know if that makes it better or worse." "It makes it real," Lisa said. "It means people remember. It means her death was not meaningless." Below the names on the memorial was an inscription. Lisa had written it herself after much thought. "They died in darkness, but their memory brings light. Never again will we look away. Never again will we accept that some evils are too large to fight. This is humanity's promise. We will remember and we will act." Drakve read the words and nodded slowly. "That is a good promise, one worth keeping." As the ceremony concluded and people began to leave, Drakve pulled Lisa and Dan aside. "I wanted you to know something. Among my people, we have a tradition. When someone dies who changed the course of history, we add their name to the Book of Stars. It is kept in our oldest temple, a record of those who mattered." He pulled out a small data tablet and showed them an image. It was a page written in the flowing script of his language. At the top was Amy's name, written in both English and Dracon. "She is the first human to be honored this way," Drakve said. "But she will not be the last. Your species has shown something important, that you do not forget and you do not forgive cruelty, that you fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Those are rare qualities in the galaxy." Lisa took the tablet, staring at her daughter's name. Tears ran down her face, but she smiled. She would have liked that. Being in a book, being remembered. She always wanted to matter, to do something important. She did, Drakve said simply. The memorial ceremony ended, but the work continued. Over the next years, the campaign against Kethrin prison ships evolved into a broader effort to establish galactic standards for prisoner treatment. Lisa became a key figure in these discussions, working with representatives from dozens of species. The Kethrin Empire itself underwent significant changes. Faced with overwhelming evidence and international pressure, they were forced to reform. The prison ship,